So today is the 27th of September, and our goal this day is to wrap up with the hands-on portion and to get you ready to complete the solution and the assessment by the end of this week. So we want to dash to the finish line with our drawings, take up the solution tasks. We'll spend Friday working on solution assistance, right? So Friday will be hands-on. Bring your systems to the Friday class and make sure that you're ready to take up the tasks associated with the solution once you have your drawing. Now, we have a number of students, 6 of them to be exact, who have not yet submitted drawings of their custom logic gate. But I will say that I was very impressed with the number and variety and creativity of those who did submit. And, we had people that submitted simple but elegant solutions. And then there were some that felt brave and bold and created some amazing combinations of logic gates. And so the range of logic gates that I saw today was pretty impressive. And what we'd like to do is spend some time to review those anonymously, right? So if you can give me just a moment here, we'll get started. And then we'll talk about the solution. Wow, seems like every time I'm ready to get going here, another student pops in and pops in. By the way, when a student hits the waiting room, do you hear the chime on the audio?
No.
You don't hear the chime on the audio as students are coming in? Because it dings. It's like a ding ding. It's like ringing a bell. And I was just wondering if that's something that you actually catch on the audio on your end. All right. Okay. So once again, we're going to review the diagrams, and this is actually the first season that I've seen students incorporating 2 logic gates, with one of them being a 3 input. And so that's significant because students have a choice to use the interface view of a logic gate when they diagram a solution, or the implementation view. And this is something that I want to call out here, because it's actually there was more than one student that said, okay, I'm going to combine, I have a simple but elegant diagram, and that simple but elegant diagram is going to involve one logic gate that has 3 inputs, like what you're seeing right here. And what they chose to do was to use the interface view of that logic gate and then combined it with just one more logic gate. So it simplifies the build for the truth table, the canonicals, because you know that this is a simple logic gate. However, it has more than 2 inputs. And in every season before this one, when students were using 3 input designs for their first submission, they showed the implementation view of their diagram, meaning they had more than one 2 input logic gate in series, right? So they showed the breakout. They expanded what was going on inside, right? And that means they presented not just 2 logic gates, but 3, 4, or 5 logic gates. And both are correct. But I wanted to share with you that if you're showing the inside part of a thing like this, there are trade-offs, and it can get more complicated. We'll see what that means in a minute. What I'd like to do now is pivot and review the 11 diagrams that have been posted so far by students. And then we'd like to talk about the requirements for the solution. So online, as you look online, after today, the same diagrams that we review in class will be used as the first step of the 2.3 solution. And if there are any suggestions for enhancement or correction on those diagrams, the student that receives that feedback, you're going to want to work that quick correction or that quick adjustment, and then take that into the solution. So that's really important to understand. This is one reason why we told students that you needed to have your diagrams in today for the class review, because that feedback is really important. If the diagram is wrinkled a little and you go into the solution, then the solution becomes frustrating, okay? So if you have not yet completed your diagram, you need to get it done at this time. And you need to, well, we've reminded people, and if you didn't get it in time, then you're not going to have credit for the assignment at this point. If you draw the logic gate and turn it in after our class, then you know, you've posted the solution, your submission for 2.1, but you didn't make any of the 3 different deadlines. We said, hey, get it in, get it in, get it in, and after a point, it's difficult, you know, when you see everybody else's work, and then I'm going to have to work on folks who are submitting their diagrams late, because there's a fairness principle here at stake, right? But the important thing to understand is you're going to want to finish this before you get to here. In fact, if you do not submit this for credit or no credit, regardless, I'm going to change the criteria for this solution so that there has to be a submission in here in order for you to engage 2.3. And those 2 items together are worth more credit than the assessment. That's 7 points worth of credit. And the assessment itself is only worth 5 points, okay? Now, put another way, if folks don't understand what's going on here, you know, I'm concerned when 6 out of 17 students just don't submit. And I don't want to have to pull a chain. I don't want to have to ask the Center for Student Success to start making phone calls with family members. But it's not a good sign when we keep repeating reminders and they're ignored. It's even greater concern when a simple drawing is what you need to be successful with something very basic, and we don't even do that, okay? So I know this seems like a kind of an edgy tone this morning, and I'm going to edit this portion of our class out, but if you're one of those 6 that hasn't turned in the 2.1, you need to stop what you're doing, adjust your priorities this week, and get on track. Because by the time we get to midterms at the end of the first week of October, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, and it's going to be hard to catch up. I'm just telling you like it is. And I need you to receive this as like a grumpy old uncle who's trying to look out for your best interest, okay? I just want to get that out of the air. Is there anyone that has any observations or comments or suggestions at this time about how I'm trying to address this matter? I mean, we're all adults, right? We're all adults in the room, so we ought to be able to have an honest conversation about things. 6 out of 17. What is 6 out of 17 as a percentage? Simple thing. more than a week time to do it, right? 6 out of 17. It's 35% of the class. That's a third of the class. I'm not satisfied watching a third of the class break on the rocks because they don't get the sense of urgency that's connected and how this all fits together. Maybe I didn't articulate completely enough how this assignment is critical for this solution, but 7 points can make a difference on your final grade. It's the difference between a 93, an A minus, and let's see, let's subtract 7 points. It's an 86. You go from an A minus to a B just for blowing up this, right? It's a whole letter grade. So, all right. That's all I'm going to say about this, and let's pivot. What we see here is a list of 11 drawings, and what we're going to do is open each one in order. They're anonymous, so what we'll have a chance to do today is to appreciate the creativity of the students who responded to the 2.1 assignment. And I want to thank everybody that submitted for the 2.1 assignment. Now, the other thing we're going to do too is I'm going to pivot and look at the criteria for the 2.1 assignment. So let's have that in view. You have to have 2 different basic components. You have to avoid the use of a standard NOR or a NAND that flips the bottom input of an AND. The diagram must be legible and neat, and at least one of the connections must show an input that feeds into another input, an output that feeds into another input that's labeled a W1, okay? So those are the 4 criteria. So as we look at this one, we have more than 2 different types, yeah? There's a not, there's an and, there's an or, and those are distinctly drawn so that the criteria we use to identify those logic gate types has been satisfied. So, and I would also say that this particular drawing reflects a more complex design. So the only thing that I would advise at this point is that there's some, because it's so complex, the first piece of it is there, but for a first, this would be a great diagram to do for the module 3 solution, okay? So the first thing I'm going to say is, wow, this is a really creative submission, and it shows some interests that we were going to take up as soon as we started our review, that you have these inputs that fork, they split, the wire is split. So if a 1, or if the current is turned on or a 1 is entered into the A input, it feeds into the NOT, but the wire is split, so it also feeds into the top input of the OR down here. Does everybody understand what I'm saying here by this diagram? So this is something we were going to cover in an upcoming class, but we get a chance to cover it now. So this is actually a very well-drawn diagram, and it's creative, and it's robust, and it's suitable for the module 3 submission. But here are some things that I'm hoping some of you can help us identify. So I want everybody to put your thinking caps on. We have labels for each input, A and B. When we have intermediate connections between the output of one logic gate and the input of another, we need to label each one of those distinctly. We have a W1 here, so that has been done. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about this right here?
Yeah, I probably would have labeled that like W2.
W2. would be a good label here. Okay, because we have to label the output, the intermediate output. So we need a W2 here. That's one thing that if now the student that drew this can choose to take the same diagram and just do 2 of the logic gates or 3 of the logic gates, right? And then save this diagram for the third module. Because this is the diagram that's needed for module 3. And I'm kind of blown away that it almost meets all of the requirements for the diagram for module 3, right? But it needs a W2 here. Now, what about this output up here? That's
Same
an
thing.
intermediate that's an intermediate output, right? That's an
Wouldn't it be
intermediate
like W3, or
W.
I mean, I guess you can label it anything you want, right?
Yes, you can label it anything you want. That is correct. But W3 works. So we have W1, then we have W2, then we have W3, and W3 feeds into the top of the OR, and W2 feeds into the bottom of the OR. So again, this is really creative, and I'm very impressed for a first submission. I don't usually see, and there were a number of students that did this. They wanted to stretch, they wanted to color outside the lines, and that's amazing. And this is not a wasted effort. So what I would do is you can keep this as it is and put a W2 and a W3 right here, and you're done. Those are the only corrections that I would offer at this time. The fact that the lines or wires are split, they're split correctly. So somebody is really getting the concepts down in a big way, and they're already applying them. They're already they're already working a solution in module 3, which is again, we've seen on the part of a couple of students. So that's something that I would do. So the student that drew this can put W2, W3, and leave it as it is, and continue on into the first solution. I mean, the solution to module 2. And if the student is successful, even though this is more complex than required, this student could log as much as twice the credit for the module 2 solution. What am I saying? You didn't have to go this far. If you do and it works, I'm going to put 10 points down instead of 5. So can I just say that I think this is worth an applause? I really do. Can we get a golf clap? Everybody unmute your microphones. Yay, help me. This is woohoo. Well done. Well done, except for 2 minor points. Oh my gosh, this goes so far above and beyond. And thank you, whoever the student is. Now, I mean, I know who you are, but we're gonna keep it anonymous, okay? Any questions or comments before we clear this screen? We're gonna pick up the pace and move a little faster. All right, let's look at our next diagram. Our next diagram includes 3. And I believe that this is a C, an H, and an O labeled for inputs. The first criteria is met because there's at least 2 different logic gates. The second criteria, where you can discern what kind of logic gate it is, has been met because the AND is rounded, the OR has a point, the NOT has a 1 input and 1 output. The output of this is labeled W1, but when you get into the HDL simulation environment, you do not want to put an asterisk there, or a star. So you don't have to change anything for your diagram. You know, this is full credit on the diagram. So every criteria has been met. You have W1 coming out of this AND, so the output is labeled. We have the output of the NOT labeled as W2, so that's satisfied. So this would be a great implementation view of a 3-input custom logic gate. And this is simple but elegant with some secret sauce thrown in. And you know, not everybody's an artist, but something that's done freehand on paper with a simple, I mean, there are new designs for technology that are done on the back of napkins all the time. So this is a flawless submission. Not one of the criteria were unsatisfied. And it's rare that we have students that turn it in and they get everything right. And they did more than 2 logic gates. They actually put in a third one. So I would say this is another hit out of the ballpark. This is another home run. If you would, unmute your microphones and join me in a round of applause for this submission. This was well done as well. Woohoo!
Yeah.
All right. Now, okay. Let's look at our criteria. I said you must avoid the use of a standard NOR or NAND that flips the bottom input of an AND. I did not say that you could not submit a NOR, or that you may not copy the same examples shown in class of a NOT OR with inputs labeled. Okay, so that was another one where the NOT applied to an input. So let's look at what was submitted. This shows X and Y inputs. It's clearly drawn. There's a slope to a point for the OR. We have an output that's labeled W1. It feeds into a NOT and comes out of a NOT. In this case, we say that the NOT is universally applied to the OR. So NOTs can be wildcards, particularly when they're applied only to one input. So NOT becomes a bit of a wild card when you flip the input of just one of the, the values of one of the inputs. But when you park a NOT in front of the output of a logic gate, what you actually create is something called a NOR. And we were going to cover this in a future segment in our class. And so this was, the criteria of the drawing assignment did not exclude anybody from doing this very thing, right? In previous classes and previous seasons, we demonstrated this in class before the drawing assignment, and then we had people that were, submitting the same thing we did in class, and that became a problem. But that's not the case here. The only restriction for the criteria of the drawing was that you didn't put the NOT here or here. So this is simple but elegant, and it's actually one of the most important logic gates. What this student did intuitively was build one of the most important compound logic gates in all of technology, because NORs and NANDs are the primary component for persistent memory we use every day now. NAND technology and NOR technology can be used to build solid-state hard drives. So this is actually one of the primary components of solid-state hard drives. And that's just mind-blowing when you think about it. Something this simple, if you use it in a variety of combinations, now you have memory that still lasts even after you turn the battery, you unplug it and turn the battery off, right? And it's all electronic. So we're not using old hard drives anymore, right? The stuff that we take for granted every day. So if we look at each of the 4 criteria of our diagram assignment, this meets every criteria, and this is full credit, and this is another example of somebody who nailed it the first round. Please join me in expressing some gratitude and yay, nailed it. Thank you. Good job. Any questions or comments at this point? Are we ready for the next drawing? Are we still connected?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. It's okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So of the 4 criteria that we mentioned, let's walk through this together. So with this diagram, the student who submitted this would receive additional credit for going above and beyond. And notice where the inputs are split, right? That's another example of the split that we were talking about before. So that's done correctly. This shows a great deal of creativity. We have an or and an and an or. So the shapes are distinct enough where we can make out which logic gate we're dealing with here, right? So we have inputs, we have outputs, we have more than 2 in combination, right? Everything is drawn correctly. There's one criteria that's missing though. Can anyone, do I have a volunteer to share with the class what's missing in this diagram? The only criteria that's missing.
Is it because they're not labeled?
Say again?
Is it because they're not labeled?
What's not labeled? That is correct.
I would say labeling the wires because the shapes tell you which chips they're using, like or and not, but just not the wires, right?
Not the what?
The wires, you know, like wire 1, wire 2.
Yeah, the wires. That's
Yeah.
right. So we have an output wire here. We have to distinguish from this output wire there, which in turn we have to distinguish from this output wire here. And all of the things that I took the time to articulate with the first complex drawing apply in this case. Okay. So this is the kind of diagram that you want to keep. And you can use this for the module 3 diagram and submit something simpler. You could do just this segment of the diagram, or do 3 logic gates and then use this original diagram for your module 3 submission, if that's the case. For the purposes of your first solution, you're going to want to go ahead and put W1, W2, and W3 right here if you want to receive full credit based on the criteria for the 2.1 diagrams submission. But again, this is another example of someone who's gone above and beyond, and with very little changes, all they have to do is take the same pen and add those labels and they're done. And then take another picture and resubmit. So let's have a short round of applause, a golf clap for this, please. Thank you very much. Woohoo!
Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
All right. So this diagram, let's look at this diagram. I'm guessing this is an and, because it's mostly curved and I don't have a distinct point here. So I'm guessing that's an and. If it were an or, I think the line would be coming out down here. So I'm just gonna say that. So it's pretty obvious that that's an and. We have a more distinct point here, so that's an or. So the shapes, the basic shapes are there, right? We have 2 inputs, And one of the things that I like about this diagram is the level of creativity that's shown, because we have two logic gates in the mix, but we don't have a third input. There are cases when you have to conserve resources. Put another way, you don't want to use as much metal when you're building chips in a chip factory. The number of wires, that's a cost associated with it. So we have two wires, we have two inputs in, and the same split or fork has been employed, and that allows that's one advantage of having the splits, is that you don't have to have as many inputs. So instead of having a C input that comes straight into the bottom, this input is split, and that there's an economy that comes with that. So that's a really good feature of this diagram. So when I feed a 1 or a 0 into the B, it not only appears here in the lower input on this AND, but it also travels down here and it becomes the lower input of the OR. And when I'm building the truth table, that's something I have to accommodate in the truth table. The label for W1 is present, and when you do your HDL simulation, you want to just use W and 1. You don't want to include the asterisk or the star, because that'll throw off the HDL simulator. The output is labeled Z, and that's also very useful. So we have a tendency by convention to just label the last line out of the diagram as out. But sometimes when these are combined with other compound logic gates, you have out for an output, and oh, over here we have another out, and oh, over here we have another out. So this student is actually, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but by labeling this output differently and distinctly, it's actually going to save a step later on if this is reused in other scenarios with other compound logic gates. You could have another custom logic gate that's built that has an output that's labeled Y, and another one that's labeled X, right? So you have X, Y, and Z for outputs and these custom logic gates, and those in turn are combined in other scenarios. So that's one aspect of this I find really appealing. Plus the fact that it's simple, it only uses two logic gates, but the split, we only have two logic gates, but we're using a third less wire in this design. And of course, in the more complex logic gates that we've already seen, every time you see a split, that's the same effect. So every one of the criteria for the diagram submission was met here. And this is another hit out of the ballpark with some really nice, you can tell there was a lot of thought that went into this. Please join me in another golf clap. I know we have to finish up soon. We don't want to take too long, but we want to make sure everybody gets their appropriate, ooh. So, could everybody just humor me here? Unmute your microphone. Unmute your microphone and join me in sort of like a ooh or an ah. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah.
Ooh.
Somebody took the time to get precise, right? So somebody took the time to do some drawing. So there was some love that went into this. You can freehand, and there can be love that goes into a free drawn diagram on pencil and paper. But this is appealing. I'll tell you, this is appealing for one reason. You can clip this out and you can reuse this diagram over and over and over again, right? And it's very clear, and it's really easy to, when you have components like this, it's really nice. We have a differential application right? A specific application of an input on the X input. So we have the not that goes into the top input, and it's X. Which logic gate are we looking at here? Is there any question what we're looking at here? It's an AND, right?
No, yeah, it's an and. Yeah.
It's an AND, okay. Now, there is one thing that I would suggest. There's one change that needs to be made. So there are two logic gates in the picture. That criteria is satisfied. The shapes are distinct. That criteria is satisfied. The not is applied in a manner that's different than the one we demonstrated in class, the one we showed in class. So that criteria is also satisfied, right? The Y, X and Y should be out here. X and Y, and the W1 needs to be in front of the not. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there about this diagram?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that would be the only change, and because this was done with drawing tools, that could be pretty quick to make. So the X input receives ones and zeros, and then when it hits the not, it's flipped, and then it comes out of the not, and that's the upper input of the AND, but there's a wire between the front of the not and the input of the AND. And that's one of those places where a lot of times the diagram, if it doesn't show, now if this is considered to be an interface diagram, then this is drawn correctly. But you'd still have X and Y here. You'd have X out here and Y here. And if someone said, okay, this is an interface diagram, it's only going to show the lines going into the logic gates. It's not going to show anything in between. So technically speaking, the only thing that we'd have to do is get rid of the W1, put the X and Y out of here. And if someone said, okay, this is an interface diagram of a compound logic gate involving a not and an and, that would be technically correct, and all the criteria would be satisfied. If this is an implementation view as a diagram, we got to show the connection between the front of the not and the input up here on the and there has to be a W1 up here, not here. Okay. So, but this gives us a chance to explain further, and I'm very glad that the individual took the time to do a clean diagram, and that certainly deserves additional credit. So as long as the student makes that change, moves the triangle back a bit, puts W1 right here and X and Y out there, we're done. Nice job, and a very clean diagram. Thank you very much. Let's keep going. Any questions, comments so far? Okay, can everyone see the screen? Hello?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
We are almost done. The rest of the reviews, we can pick up the pace here. So this is input A, input M. That's clear. This is an AND, a two input AND. W1 is here. There's a single input to the not and a single output, and the output is labeled. This is clean, simple, and elegant. It hits all criteria. It's a flawless submission for the first round. Well done. Join me in expressing some appreciation for the simple but elegant design here. That's very clean looking too. I got to say that took some love and some time to do as well. I don't know if it was done on a tablet or smartphone with a stylus, but that's very clean looking. So thank you for that. All right, we're gonna rotate this so we can see it, and we'll zoom in. So this is an A and B input with a knot in front. And the only thing that's missing here is a W1 coming out of the OR. So there is a slope, there is a point here, and then there's a knot going into the upper input of the OR. So the only thing that I would do is this expression down here. So in this case, if this is Z, so what we'd want to do is label this Z. If you have Z here, or is that 2? That's probably a 2. So the 2, if the output is labeled, that could be a cursive Q. So I've seen cursive Qs, capital letter Qs written like that. But there's some clarity right there. We need to know if that's like the number 2, or if that's a Z, or if that's just somebody writing real quick in lowercase. But that, so this criteria was not required. The writing out the Boolean function for the logic diagram. But it does help explain what we're looking at. So we know we're looking at an OR, there are A and B inputs, and that there's a not applied universally. So this part of the expression is correct. The only thing I would change here is to clarify the output label, and then do exactly the same thing right here. So that's actually above and beyond. Most students do not include the Boolean, the functional statement for the Boolean equivalent with their diagrams. So that aspect of it is a value added thing. So we have 2 different versions, right? We have the not applied to the upper input of an OR. And the same comment applies to this and here. We want some clarity about if you're going to include it, then just make sure there's a clear connection between what you label here. That's the same thing you want to put there. However, the not applies to the A. So what you're going to want to do is put in parentheses not A or B. So the not A is in parentheses. Or you could put a line above the A. So it's bar A or B. And just get rid of the not. So when you have the not outside, you just want to make sure that the not is shown distinctly, that it applies exclusively to the A. And as it's written with a space in between, there could be a parentheses here and here. It's kind of left open-ended, is what I'm saying. Now, if there was no space here and it was not A without a space, then it would be clear. So that's the only thing. That's the only thing I would add to this. The student met all criteria except one. Can anyone guess what the one criteria that's missing?
Labeling the wire.
The wire, the W1 here or the W1 there. So this student's going to receive additional credit for the submission because the student gave us more than one diagram and included additional information, right? But there'll be some suggestions. So with some quick edits, I think this looks like it might be done in pencil, or maybe not. But it would be a quick thing to add the W1 and to clarify those 2 points. So once again, thank you for your submission. And everybody's showing, there wasn't a single person that is not showing here's another simple but elegant submission. We have A and B inputs. This is an AND. W1 is labeled. Not changes the output. So what we're looking at is a NOR. The same comments I applied before apply in this case. Full credit. Good work. Next. Thank you. Let's see. All right, so this is one I want to take a moment to explain. There's a knot. This is actually a very good diagram, and it's very interesting, and it meets nearly all of the criteria. We have an OR, there's an out, there's a W1, and this is a knot. So there's a small triangle that's a knot. The only thing we're missing is a label for the other input right here. So we have a W, and then we need another letter with one line drawn right here, and then the O. And if that one line with one letter is there, whoever draw this diagram, all you got to do is pick another letter and draw the line out of the back of the knot. The W1 is there, so that's there. Let's see. You could spell who, right? So make it, play on words. Or if this is an N, I think it's a W. Oh, it's N, N-O, right? So if it was N and O, and that was how that's written, this could be a P in the middle, or it could be an M. There, when you're being creative, there could be conventions that you intend. So that's the only thing that's needed for this diagram to be a complete submission. And the fact that there are 3 inputs, and that this is an input, this is the input view of a compound logic gate, that's really nice. And this is actually the first time I've ever seen an input view of a compound logic gate done in this manner, and it's so close to being flawless. I've never seen it in all the years I've taught. I've never seen somebody work a compound diagram but do it on the input view and do such a good job of it. So this is really unique and very fresh, and I was very surprised but pleased with this, and I just wanted to share that with the class before we cleared. So I think that might be, we have one more and that's it. If you have time to stay in view, we should be done in about 2 minutes. So what I'd like to do is keep going, and in the interest of time, let's see, let's get our, oh, the last one is a PDF. That's why we're not seeing it. Last one is a PDF. So this is another input view. This is an input view of a 3 input AND. It's like this right here. So we have an AND that's an A, B, and a C, and that implies that there are 2 ANDs in series. So this is another case of the same kind of thing. We're seeing the input view, and we're seeing this for the first time in that manner, right? So we have A, B, and C, but we have the knot. So this is drawn almost like an OR. I would ask this student, if you're going to have an OR, you have to have a D input. If it's going to be shaped where it's sloped and there's a point, if you want this to be distinctly a knot, I mean, we're assuming it's distinctly a knot because there's one input and one output. So you want to make sure that it's more of a triangle and not so much like a high-powered bullet rifle, a rifle bullet. I hope I'm making sense here. So that would be the only, the W1 is there, the output is there. There's additional credit that I'm gonna post because it's a 3-input logic gate. And again, this is the second case for the first time in all the years I've taught where a student has used a 3-input or a 3-input and in a diagram. The only suggestion would be to, and it's only a suggestion, okay, so there's still full credit. But if you wanted to do this precisely, you'd want to make this more of a triangle and less of a, it doesn't need to look like an OR. We don't want to, we don't want people to think, okay, is this an OR and we're missing an input, or is it a not? We don't want to leave anything to doubt there. I hope I'm being, that's, hope that makes sense. All right, so this concludes our review of the diagrams. And what I'd like you to do is to go ahead and get started in your solution. So in our, as soon as you see the credit and the comments that are posted in the 2.1, you can go ahead and start working up the truth table for your diagram, and then the canonical expressions for your diagram. And then on Friday, we're gonna use that as a workshop to get into the HDL environment, and then take the truth tables and canonicals and use those to build your logic gates. Are there any questions or comments before we clear class for the day? For those of you that could stay longer in class, I appreciate your latitude for waiting until the diagram review was over. I am impressed with the diagrams that I've seen, and to me, this was a great first submission for all of you that submitted. For those of you that haven't submitted yet, you need to get on the ball and get those in. So we'll see you on Friday. Bring your HDL simulators live on Friday. Thank you all, and we'll see you Friday.
Have a good one.